Alrighty guys, today I'm going to be teaching you everything I know about how to water a Phalaenopsis orchid, starting from the type of potting mix that you have them in, as well as the type of pot, the type of water you should be using, and when to fertilize, and the type of fertilizers that you can use, and how to know when to water your orchids based on the environment that you have them in. So let's just go ahead and get started. So if you have your Phalaenopsis orchids potted in mostly sphagnum moss, or if you have them potted in mostly orchid bark mixed with other type of ingredients, the frequency in which you water both of these is going to be very different, especially if you live in like a much drier environment. So for example, I live in California, and when I have an orchid in orchid bark and other type of like ingredients like sponge rock or leca, I tend to water my orchids about once a week. But whenever I have an orchid potted in mostly sphagnum moss, it takes a little bit longer for it to dry out. So I will go about a week and a half without watering this orchid again. So that's why it's really important to just keep an eye on how frequent the water is drying out from the pot. If you live in Florida, you might notice how the weather conditions there are a lot more humid, and so that will also reduce the frequency in which you have to water. But if it's also really hot, and if you keep your plants inside, then you're gonna have to probably water more frequently because you probably have the AC running all day. So that's something to also keep in mind. But if you have them outdoors, you're probably not gonna have to worry about it as much. So I keep all of my Phalaenopsis orchids, mostly all of them actually, in this type of pot. It's a clear plastic pot that you can see inside of it. It has the slits on the side for better airflow, and it has a lot of drainage holes. I really recommend these pots, especially if you're like a beginner or wanting to learn how to take care of your orchids better, because it will let you see inside of the potting medium, and you will be able to see if the roots are dried or if the potting medium has a little bit of moisture left in it, so that you know when to water your plants, and that is very helpful. If you keep your orchid potted in a plastic pot or a ceramic pot, it's not going to dry out as fast compared to when you keep an orchid in a terracotta pot, because terracotta pots absorb any moisture from the potting medium and then slowly release it back in there, or they just dry out a little bit faster. These pots, they don't do that, so that's why you're also gonna have to look into the type of the pot that you're using, and that's also gonna vary your watering frequency. Okay, so now I'm gonna be talking about So the reason I don't recommend people to water their orchids with tap water is because tap water can have a lot of contaminants such as like magnesium, sodium, what are the other ones, iron, and I'll list them all on the screen. But basically all of these can be really harmful to the orchid. And while tap water may be safe for you to drink in your area, that doesn't mean it's safe for your orchids, because these orchids, again, they are grown out like in the wild. So imagine an orchid hanging from a tree, and it's like raining in the rainforest, right? So this water is falling from the sky, and it's falling in between all of the leaves, and it's getting filtered, and then eventually it reaches this orchid. This orchid is receiving like pure quality water. It's not like the purest, but it is better than tap water, and that's why it's best to just give them like, maybe, I don't know, like filtered water might be a better option, or distilled water, or if you install a reverse osmosis system in your home, you can give them reverse osmosis water. I personally use distilled water, and I buy my gallons from Target, and it's probably not the most eco-friendly option because I do produce plastic waste, but I try to reuse these as much as possible with like making more pots, or just, I don't know, I try to recycle them. And I do want to install a reverse osmosis system because I do have so many orchids. But the thing with that is that it's also not so eco-friendly because you do waste a lot of water with the filtration process. So I don't know which one's best in my case, to be honest, but we'll talk about that in the future. But for now, if you have maybe like 5 orchids, I recommend just buying some distilled water gallons if you want to, like, you know, improve your orchid care hobby. Then this is definitely going to make a difference. Also, I would really like to quickly point out that if you're just starting out with orchids, I wouldn't worry about getting the quality of the water correctly. First, focus on trying to get fertilizing and repotting and just taking care of your orchid correctly, giving it the right amount of light before you focused on the water part. Because I know that buying distilled water is like obviously a separate cost, and you definitely don't have to focus on this in the beginning, only if you want to get really serious about the hobby. I use these two different fertilizers. This is a granular form, this is a liquid form, and then there's also like the foliar spray form. Fertilizers that you can buy at Home Depot. Those are all great to use, and what you decide to use is up to you. But what you want to make sure of is that any fertilizer that you buy has extra nutrients for your orchids aside from like the typical NPK values, especially if you're watering your orchids with reverse osmosis water or distilled water, because again, these types of waters don't have any added minerals for your plants. So I have this empty plastic pot. As you can see, it doesn't have any drainage holes because I use these as like my water catch pots or whatever they call them. So I actually just repotted this orchid, and you can see the video in my Instagram if you want to watch it. Since I just repotted this orchid, I'm not gonna fertilize it because it doesn't need to be fertilized. And it's an orchid rescue, so as you can see, it's going through so much stress because it's so leathery. So I don't normally recommend people to fertilize their orchids when they are trying to rescue them. So I'm just gonna apply the distilled water, and I'm gonna fill it up all the way to the base. I just make sure that all of it is getting soaked, and I'm gonna leave this in here for about 20 minutes before I drain it out and put it back in its cover pot and put it back under the grow lights. So look at this orchid right here. I'm gonna water it because I can see that the orchid potting mix in here is dried. The roots are silver, and again, it's a very light pot. So I'm gonna put this in here, and now that I have this gallon of water right here, I'm gonna add some liquid fertilizer to it. Now I'm gonna be using this one, the one from Dino Grow, and it's a liquid fertilizer. And in the back it says to add a half a teaspoon to every gallon of water, but I'm not gonna add half a teaspoon. I'm gonna add half of a half. And I know that this isn't 1 gallon of water anymore, but again, I'm adding only a quarter of the fertilizer, so it's totally fine. I'm just gonna mix this really well. I can then go ahead and apply it to my orchids the very same way that I did with the other one that was just water. I inspect that the potting medium is dry and that this pot feels light, and this is something that you get better at over time. If you don't have a clear pot, go based off of the weight of the pot and just poke around the top of the potting medium, and if it looks dry, then you can go ahead and water, and if it looks a little bit moist, then you should probably wait a couple of more days. Also, another sign of dehydration on orchids is the leaves. If they're very leathery and bendable, then that means that this orchid needs water, especially when the orchid potting mix is dried, the roots are silver, and the pot is really light. So in this case, you want to make sure that you water your orchid really, really well. Get water on top of the crown. The crown is the topmost part of the orchid where the two top leaves connect. You don't want to get any water there because if you do, it can cause rotting issues, and if it rots, no new leaves can grow out from there, and that's not a good thing for your orchid. And as a matter of fact, if you get any water anywhere on your orchid leaves or the crown, be sure that you wipe it so that you can avoid rotting issues or any other bacterial leaf infections. Now I'm going to show you how I water my orchids that are potted in moss. So I either put them inside another cover pot and I add a little bit of distilled water, and I just let the moss be, the water be absorbed by the moss for a few seconds, not a lot, because moss absorbs water very quickly and it spreads out also throughout the day. And also if you wet it too much, it can cause root rot issues. So you only want to leave it in here for a few seconds. What you can also do is take it over to the sink and give it a good drink of water all around, and that's it. You don't want to use any soaking method with plants that are in moss. After 20 minutes have passed, I now go back to my orchids and I'm gonna make sure that I drain them out properly so that I don't get any water left behind in these cover pots before I place them back in and put them under the grow lights. So I'm gonna show you a little trick. Whenever I'm doing this, I tilt the orchid pot a little bit to the side because that's when most of the water is coming out, because when I put it straight, at some point it just stops. But tilting it also helps just, get rid of all of the water properly. And then after that, what I do is I just dump out all of this other water inside this bucket, and I use that water to water all of my other plants that are living outside and are a little bit more resilient. I also really like to keep these orchids inside cover pots because it makes the watering process so much easier. Like, all I have to do is add water in here and then get rid of it once I am done watering the plant. And also it increases the humidity around the plant, which is very beneficial for the aerial roots because aerial roots absorb moisture from the air. So all of this humidity is basically very beneficial for them. And lastly, when you're done draining out all of the orchids, make sure you go back again and drain out the orchids once more, because believe it or not, there will be some water there, and this water can be enough water to cause root rot, so be sure you get rid of it. Okay, you guys, that pretty much sums up everything I wanted to tell you about how to water a Phalaenopsis orchid. I hope this really helps you out. If you've learned anything new or found this information valuable, please be sure to subscribe. It really helps me out as I'm just starting out in this YouTube journey. I already have so much plant care content over on Instagram and TikTok, so be sure to follow me there as well so you can catch up. And I'm really excited to be over here on YouTube because I have so many plant projects that I want to share with you guys, like this IKEA greenhouse cabinet. This year is going to be all about me putting effort on this YouTube channel. So I hope that it all goes well and that you stick around to support me. So thank you so much, and again, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye!